And thanks to everyone for being here. Sound is good? Sound is definitely good. Okay. I think they can hear me on the other side of the conference center now, so I think he's going to control it more than I can. All right. Okay, a little bit of background about me. You got a substantial bio, so I don't know that there's that much more for me to say, but as Nadia said, my work has covered corporate learning, professional development, and higher education. And my company is Kaleidoscope Learning, which creates online learning experiences for organizations both large and small, and I teach at Columbia University in New York. So kind of have a foot in the academic world as well as the corporate world. And it's really at the intersection of computer science and artificial intelligence, which is part of my background, cognitive science and education. So one of the things I worked on was considered the first corporate learning training simulation from way back, which used some AI techniques back in 1991. So some of that will feed into this today. We're going to talk progressively more about AI as the day goes on. So I'll talk somewhat about AI, though, about technology in general. And some of the talks later will talk more about AI. So, all right. Hey, a little bit more. I mentioned my company, which designs and develops learning and performance experiences, and Columbia and the Learning Ideas Conference. So those are the things that I'm involved in on a regular basis. But let's talk about people and technology. So when I talk about how you might want to use technology, one thing to think about is what do people do well versus what can technology do well? Okay, so if there are lots of answers to these questions. A few things that I came up with. If we had a longer talk, I'd probably want to, go around the room and see what people thought. But in the time that we have, one thing that people do is think creatively. Okay, so it's one thing that people do well. People can invent things. People think critically. They make sense of things. They don't necessarily accept something that you read or see or are told. You think about it. All these things are related. People can make decisions. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they're generally thoughtful in one way or another. People, we hope, show empathy, think of others, put yourself in other people's shoes, show emotions, relate to other people's experiences. These all kind of fit in the category of things that people generally might do. Technology is a little different. Technology doesn't have the same strengths that people do. Okay? Technology is great at remembering information. Right? You store something in a database, it's going to be there. It's going to be there. Computer's not going to get tired. It's not going to forget. It's not going to lose track of things. It's not going to decide that it wasn't important. If it's stored, it's stored. Performing computations, it can compute things. That's what they're there for. And they can repeat tasks or do what we might call uninteresting work without getting bored. Right? A computer's not going to get bored. You want to run this process over and over, keep doing it. Most people probably get a little tired of that. Again, computers are available anytime, anywhere. They're not going to get tired. Okay? No technology is going to get tired. Might run out of batteries, that's about it. And we can, with human design help, deliver engaging and fun experiences. So those are some of the things that I think. So the last one involves, both sides. But I would note that in today's world of generative AI, the lines are beginning to blur a little bit. And there are lots of discussions we can have, and I think we'll have more in the panel than we will in this session, about where AI best can fit in and where we trust AI to help with creativity and in what ways. So lots of things to think and talk about. So when I think about technology, one of my views is always to think goals first and tools second. All right, so technology of all kinds is a tool, whether it's software, whether it's a hammer. But when you're using it, when I think of the theme of this session, which is how do you use technology instead of letting it use you, if you have a hammer was designed for certain purposes. Mostly hammering nails. It's got a grip on it, it's got a head on it, it does some other things, it can take nails out. You might find other uses for it, they're more creative. You might need to put a hole in your wall for some reason, I don't know, there are reasons. But mostly, a hammer has certain purposes. But as the expression in English always tells you, just because you have a hammer doesn't mean that everything it looks like a nail, right? So, if you have a tool in hand, this is the way I look at technology. If you look at a software tool, think about the goals. Think about what it is that you want to accomplish and how that can help you. rather than thinking purely about what does this piece of software do? Because that's going to drive you down the path of doing the things that the software does, rather than doing the things that you want to do. Which goes back to my first slide where I feel that people are the ones making decisions. Related to that, technology as the right kind of tool. Okay, this is an old story. This is a little comic version of it. You might have heard this story where someone lost their wallet or their keys in different versions. And the policeman comes over to help. He's looking for it and says, is this where you lost your wallet? I said, no, I lost it in the park, but this is where the light is. Okay? It's easy to fall into that trap, especially when you've got a piece of software with you. Like, what does it do? Well, I should do that. Right? What's going to be easy? I should do the easy thing. But think about how technology can help you do things easily, but do the things that you want to do. Those are kind of my big points on that. Talk a little bit about generative AI, which we'll be talking more and more about even through the rest of the afternoon here. Where's it best fit in learning and development is really a key question. So I think there are two general areas, and one of them is kind of my personal favorite, which is what kind of experiences can we create using technology, not just AI, but computers and laptops and virtual reality and augmented reality and all sorts of other things to improve learning and performance. Right? So, there are so many traditional educational methods that we've seen time and time again. You read something, you watch something, you take a quiz, you answer some questions, you move on. A lot of corporate learning, when I consult, is still like that. That's really a lot of what it is. And that doesn't necessarily help people do anything better. It's also not a lot of fun for people to do, but it doesn't help you do something better. It tests whether you memorize. It doesn't put you in positions to do the things that you're going to have to do as a human working a job. Make decisions, think critically, analyze situations. So the more we can use technology on the learning side to put people in really interesting situations. Okay, I mentioned learn by doing simulations a little bit in my background. That was a lot of my own area. Where you want to teach people how to be good at customer service. Instead of telling them about customer service, we put them in an environment where they have to work with customers and they might make mistakes and they'll get some coaching guidance and feedback, maybe from an AI-based tutor, and they'll get good at it. But they'll learn by doing. Technology can really, really help, but the technology is not going to come up with that, probably. Again, we'll see where generative AI takes us, but I'm still looking at the days where we are designing these experiences. Technology is going to help us quite a bit in what we can produce. Second part's more about the workflow that you have within an L&D department. How does technology, and especially AI, help us create these experiences more effectively, more efficiently? And to me, that's somewhat of a dangerous question in a couple of ways. Technology can be incredibly helpful. And AI can be helpful in bouncing ideas off of. AI can be helpful in doing some of the tasks maybe that you want to offload. People are still learning exactly what the best ways are to use it, and it's changing all the time. But there's also a danger that you want to build and create the things that are easy to create. So again, it gets back to some of the, looking where the light is. It's really easy for AI at this point to create, simple PowerPoint slides that have some bullets and put a little quiz at the end based on facts. That's at the point where, pretty quickly going to be at the point where maybe we don't need people to do that. Computers can do that. But then the big question is, do we want to do that at all? Is that the right kind of learning experience? And with the technology opportunities we have, we can create different experiences. And that's a lot of what I argue for in a lot of the talks that I give. A little bit more about AI. So I mentioned at the beginning my own background was partly in artificial intelligence. The AI of today that we see, ChatGPT and DeepSeek and all the other competitors, there's so many that they're coming out, things are changing. I think between the time I wrote this talk and the time I, got off a plane and gave this talk, we had DeepSeek come out, right? So things are changing really rapidly. But those are all large language models, right? So those are a machine learning approach where it reads in a tremendous amount of data. It takes a lot of resources to do that, although fewer with the new DeepSeek thing, which was the big news story. And it basically predicts, when it generates text, for example, it's basically predicting what the next word or phrase will be based on all the data. And then it keeps refining that. That's the model that's working. Now that has advantages we're seeing things that we never thought we would see, I think, this quickly. But it also has disadvantages and concerns, right? There are a lot of AI hallucinations in large language models. There's a lot, where is the information coming from? Do we trust the information that's being fed? If you're within an organization, can you just enter your company's information somewhere? Where's that going to go? When's that going to show up with a competitor? There are all sorts of questions about it. But that's the model that you're going to be most familiar with these days. The AI that I did years ago, and I think this still has a role, was called a symbolic AI approach, or based on knowledge representation. We would really study a content area and learn about it, and manually, basically, it took a lot of manual human effort to describe in a set of data and rules what this content area was. But you could do some really cool things. When we built these AI simulations way back 30 years ago, we had an AI tutoring component that would follow these rules. It would understand the context of the software simulation someone was in, and it could provide guidance and feedback within this constrained area. It couldn't produce a song written in Bob Dylan style. It couldn't produce a video. It couldn't write something that looked creative. But it could do this particular task really, really pretty well and feel pretty natural doing it in a constrained environment. So there's a lot to think about on what AI could turn into and how these different approaches might complement each other. There are some questions there too. So to me, the present and future of AI, things are just changing so rapidly. The future may feel different next week than it does this week, but there's a lot to think about from the standpoint of how do you use it that it involves just sort of being aware of what's out there and trying things out. All right, some themes. Making the most of technology, making the most of what you can do. I think a lot of harnessing AI and probably any tech. Be clear about your goals. I know I keep coming back to this already in our short time. What do you want to accomplish? How can technology help you get there? So I think some of the people who are using AI in ways that really help them, they're able to get it to do some tasks that are repetitive, or they're able to ask some good questions to help it come up with ideas that they can work from. I think those are a couple ways, and people in this room may have other ways that are helpful for them. But as long as you stay clear and focused on your goals, I think you'll make the most out of it. And with any kind of software, I would say, experiment, understand the capabilities, spark ideas, but let your goals drive the process. So again, you don't want to just do what the software drives you to do. And we've seen that in learning and development for a long time, right? So for example, to run a course in a learning management system in pretty much any company, people are producing courses in SCORM, which has been the case for decades now, which is a fairly limited technology environment, right? It's really fairly limited. And the tools that are out there are also fairly limited just by their very nature. So my company will do some things in Storyline, for example, and it's a useful tool. But Storyline's basic concept is the concept of slides. Okay, so you start with the idea of, okay, well, I guess, if you don't think more about it, you're going to build slides. But slides aren't really necessarily the best learning experience. So our teams will try to, at least when they have to use a tool like that, we have a full programming team, so they don't always. But when they have to use those kinds of tools, think about what do I really want to produce, and how can this tool get me there or get me close to there? And it's a different way of thinking about it than starting with the tools moving up. To me, again, it's also about experiences. Think about the ideal experience that you want to create and then scale back. Okay? So, you can't always do everything that you want. But if you think about the constraints first, my experience has been that's going to really constrain your thinking in a very literal sense. So think about, what do I want to produce? What do I want people to be able to do? What are my goals? Design something, at least in your head, start to sketch out ideas, and then you can look at the technology and say, okay, well, how's this going to help me get there? Rather than seeing it as a priori limitation. Other theme, always, job performance is the goal in the workplace, okay? And you can get there a few different ways. You can get there through learning. You can get there through just-in-time support, something that helps you do the job better, right? A lot of AI's role in generative AI has been just-in-time support now? How does this help me do something that I used to have to learn how to do, but now maybe I can get some help? Sometimes you can change processes. Okay? So there are 3 different ways that you can really go to improve job performance, and not all necessarily learning. Font got cut off a little bit. Okay. All right, so I'll pause on that for just one second for the full effect. Another theme, let me tell you a quick story. That's another one of those stories that's kind of been around for a very long time, like the one about the wallet and the keys and the lamppost. There's a story about cooking a roast. And in this story, somebody cooks a roast in an oven, looks like this, and they do it, first thing they do before they put the roast in the oven is cut off the end. So you can kind of see on the right-hand side, the end of the roast was cut off. You may have heard this story. So someone asked, well, why do you do it? What's the purpose of cutting off the end of the roast? How's that, does it help it, you're kind of just throwing away some of the meat, right? Why are you doing that? What's the purpose? And it was one of those, the answer was, well, nobody really, it's a good question. I learned this, from my mother. My mother did it. Okay, so they go to the mother. Well, where did this come from? What's the purpose of this? So, well, I learned from my mother. Okay, it goes on and on. Finally, what they find out when they go back a couple generations is, well, why did you cut the ends off the roast? And the answer is, because that was the only way that the roast would fit in the oven. The oven that I had was much smaller. And so the lesson really in this is it's very easy to follow traditions without rethinking them, without thinking about why are we doing things the way they're doing. And we do that a lot in learning. There's a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of traditional learning, in a class, in a lot of classes in person, you're in a situation where you have one person and 30, 40, 400 students. So you're limited in what you can do in that environment that's going to be practical. In an online world, you're not so limited in terms of scope and scale. You can do, we build an online learning experience for one person that could be good for hundreds of people. The collaboration part's a little trickier, but anything that's sort of self-paced, we built Learn by Doing simulations to teach customer service, and they were taken by hundreds of thousands of people, right? And they all had, if there's an AI tutor, they can all get that AI tutor. If there's one human tutor, they only got one. Okay. So again, key points when using tech. I'd also say, use it confidently. Believe in yourself, believe yourself. Don't let the software decide. It's kind of the underlying theme, and I keep coming back to that. Also, don't assume the software is designed ideally. A lot of times, things are confusing, and the problem isn't you, right? So it's very easy, I think, for people to kind of just decide, well, maybe, I don't know how to use this. Well, that may be true, but again, think about what your goals are and how to get it to serve your needs rather than saying, oh, I guess I just have to do what it's forcing me to do. I could spend a whole other talk talking about the software design, common software design issues that drive me crazy. But some of them are usability related. Some of them are sort of stylistic. There's a whole lot. So, well, one stylistic one. I'll give one stylistic example. I bought a computer from Lenovo, big computer manufacturer, not long ago. And after I clicked the buy button on the website, I got a confirmation email. And the confirmation email said, "Congratulations, David." I mean, first of all, I think they should be the ones being congratulated for making the sale, right? So what are you congratulating me for? Are you congratulating me for using your website, which shouldn't be all that complicated? Are you congratulating me for choosing Lenovo over competitors? I don't know that I really want to be congratulated for that. You should be congratulated for making the sale. So there's a language style that comes up a lot in the way that software is designed that, tries to emulate humans but doesn't always. And on the AI side, the LLMs sound realistic. It's a different issue, but this comes up a lot in software design. Again, look for ways to accomplish what you want. You're trying to do something with a piece of software, ask someone if you've got someone, search online, research, experiment, don't rely on, if it's software, don't rely on the help system necessarily, a lot of resources out there. A couple more key themes. One is the concept of design. This is a Steve Jobs quote about design. which I fully agree with. I talk a lot about designing software, designing learning experiences, and people think about, the look of the course. What's it going to look like? And that's part of it. But to me, that is very much what Steve Jobs says here, right? That's almost at the end, right? You start with what's the goal? What do we want to accomplish? What kind of experience can we give people and let them experience so they can accomplish their goals? Become an attorney who's great at interviewing clients in their first meeting. That's one course my company did a couple years ago. Become great at customer service. Whatever it is, design experience is going to work that way, and everything else comes from what the goals are and what's right for the audience, and all of that to me is part of the design process. The outer layer is really just the outer layer. It's part of it, but it's just the outer layer. All right, scaling up. I talked a little bit about that before with technology. We can scale. We build an experience for one person. It's going to work for 100,000 people or 1 million people. So we have the opportunity to do that, and it also means that it's worth the investment a lot of the time. Right? Because one of my fears is it becomes so easy to build really inexpensive PowerPoint slides that companies will say, well, great, we don't really need L&D anymore. And I hope it doesn't come to that. But I also think that the role needs to change, and the role should have been changing to this anyway, to think about what are the right kinds of experiences that will help people learn. And people are needed for that. They're not needed to just put content up on a screen because that's not the right approach anyway. All right, a couple minutes. Where does tech fit in learning? Allows us to scale up and reach a large audience, gives us anytime, anywhere access, but also, the point I'll continue to make, we can design new methods of learning, active, authentic, meaningful learning experiences and performance experiences that really help people, that don't look like or feel like what we've seen before, and don't feel like the kind of school experiences a lot of people had just moved to online. Because we have opportunities to do something different. And continue to do that. So we have game-like elements, we have coaching, we have AI helping us with that, we have learn by doing simulations, so many things that we can do, put people in environments where they can experiment. Okay. Quick slide showing me my view of learning technologies. The old model was, there's learning theory and there's technology, and you kind of bring them together. But to me, it's so much more than that. It's all these different areas blended together holistically. Okay, so it's not just transfer and translate. It's take all these models and bring them together. Okay, really quickly, a few screens from what a future training experience might be like. This is a student who's in this moment in a training room, but instead of going into the room, he clicks a button and sees a store projected on a screen. So he's a retail customer service person. And he sees this store, and he gets to interact with the customers in this store. It feels realistic. So it's projected, but it's have a 3D world. And he sees a customer, and he goes up to her, and he asks if he can help her find anything. And there's an AI coach who jumps in and says, make sure you smile and look friendly. Okay, so he does that. Again, just gives you a feel for this realistic interaction that he might have. And just a couple minutes and a couple more slides, and then we'll leave time for questions. Says, let me check for you. And at the end, he might get a good performance summary. The AI coach says he did great, but needs to work more on his facial expressions. So in this, we're using all sorts of things, sensors to check your facial expressions, learn by doing, doing actual realistic tasks, still getting some kind of score, but it's an authentic, realistic score. How good are you at each of the real aspects of the real job? All right, so I'll kind of show really quickly because I'm pretty much running out of time to leave time for questions. It's experiential. It's learn by doing. You have coaching. Feedback was from an AI coach. Could be from peers as well. Performance-based assessment. The evaluation was authentic and realistic. Okay. Overall, it's an immersive, personalized experience. Okay. AI was there for the coach and to track learner performance. Okay. All right. Looking ahead and wrapping up, AI L&D can largely benefit from technology and AI in the workflow and in the types of experiences that we can create. There is a risk that tech can drive the wrong behavior if we let it. As I said, we don't want to just build a lot of simplistic learning that doesn't help people because it's easy and fast. There's no real return on that investment. It may be no investment, but you're not getting anything out of it. Okay? Always keep goals in mind. So on that, one closing quote from Isaac Asimov. Oops. Wow. This is in 1983. He predicted the world of 2019. And he said that education, which must be revolutionized, will be revolutionized by the computer. And this was his prediction for the world of 2019. And we're not quite there yet, but the idea is that education and corporate learning will be fun in the right ways because they'll be intrinsically motivated. It will bubble up from within and not be forced in from without. We're not just going to lecture at people. So on that, I've got a few minutes left for questions. Thank you so much for your time. I do have a book out also on Amazon if you want to go read more about this. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this. All right. Time for a couple more questions, or a couple of questions, if anyone has any. One in the back.
Thanks, David. Quick one. So you mentioned a lot about immersive and using AI for training, for scaling up. In this whole world and in this whole picture, where is the place for instructor-led training where there is one instructor and there are 20 students learning, because that has its own charm, if I can use that word.
Yeah.
So where do you think is the place for that kind of training versus the scaling up using AI, training hundreds and thousands in a simulated environment?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Ideally, to me, I mean, it's very situation dependent, but that also there are times where you can mix the two a little bit more. So for example, you might imagine an in-person class where you put someone in a simulation first and then they talk about what they experienced. So it can change some of the ways that you run a class. So you may still have, and then you're going to get the human relationship and element that you absolutely value, but it's not as much lecture, it's much more of a coach or mentor. So that's a way that technology could help. Maybe you don't always, it doesn't always have to be in everything. I mean, a lot of the factors are related to scale, right? Look, I teach at Columbia, my class maxes out at 30 students. I have them do very individual projects. So for the class project, they design their own learning experience for any job that they choose, any company they want. Might be something they know about or something they're interested in. I can't do more than 30. I mean, that's pushing it, right? So there's a constraint there. So if I wanted to have that kind of experience, I'm not at the point where I would want AI to be giving them that feedback. It's an interesting thing to consider, but it feels like a lot of what I do in that class, I do feel strongly about it. Develop relationships with people. They feel comfortable coming to me with questions. You have, it's kind of like having 30 of your own graduate students in a semester. And, not sure we're near the point yet where people would feel comfortable that way with a machine. So I think that's an area where the more personal the project, the more you want to try to work in people, but a lot of it comes down to practical constraints. And, I'd rather have 300 people or 300,000 people get close to this experience than nobody. So that's kind of, it's a great question. And it's something to keep an eye on as we go and see, how things evolve. I know some universities in the US are using AI as a teaching assistant, so people can send questions. And I think that works pretty well when they say it works, because the questions they're getting are usually content-based or logistics-based. I think they'll say, oh, well, 3/4 of the questions they get are what time is office hours? Okay, well, AI can handle that. And AI can handle some of the content questions pretty well, direct people to things. But you don't get the relationship. You don't, it's a different kind of class, I think, that they're doing than what I do. And so I think, I wouldn't feel like, as an AI person, I would not want to put that into the experience that I have right now.
I don't think so.
It's a great question. It's really interesting. Okay. Time. One more question in the front if we have time. One more question right in the front. Or are we out of time?
Just one, yeah.
It's not really a question.
Last one.
It's just you would consider then social presence and social immediacy in online learning very important.
I think it's situation dependent, right? So in other words, when we build simulations to teach people customer service and there's no instructor there, that's worked really, really well, and with less good technology than we're starting to have. And I think that works well because they're in really interesting scenes with, the actors come up and they're really engaging characters that they're interacting with. They're not real, but you have a realistic feeling experience. And you don't need the close relationship with a mentor for that kind of thing, the way that, we just talked about here, right? Like that's the kind of thing where you're really learning from the experience. You don't necessarily need, some people might want that, but it really works pretty well for most people to not have it. Other situations, like I said, my own class at Columbia, I feel like, okay, for what they're doing, which is very complex and very personal, hard to imagine getting nearly as much out of a simulated world for that. So I think that's, I think these are great areas to keep talking about and thinking about, right? And I think to not just say, okay, AI can take over, but where is it going to best fit? And I think that's exactly the questions that we're getting are getting exactly to that. So I do think it's, relationships are important, social presence is important, collaboration is important, but not every problem has the same solution. And each of these factors has different weights and sometimes no weight depending on the practicalities and depending on the kind of role that it is and the kind of skill that you're trying to help people learn. So, it's a great question though. Thank you. A great way to wrap up, I think. So thank you once again.